Hello, everybody, and welcome, welcome, welcome to Explaining the Unexplainable. And I am one of your hosts, Mercedes Lucky Benedict. And I've got my amazing co host here with us here tonight, Bishop Joshua Sparks.
Hello,
And
hello.
yeah, we are excited because this is, we always have a phenomenal show, but this one's very special because this gentleman here that is with us as our guest, I first heard about him on Warrior Mode, and I also heard about him on the Kev Dave Baker show. And they always talked about him, and it was like, wow, who's this guy? So the more I've gotten to research him and see him on shows, I just really deem this a great honor to be able to have him here with us, Bishop Joshua. I really do. And so I'm going to go ahead and
Absolutely.
I'm going to let you introduce him because you are such a marvelous introducer of the people that come on here. So you take it away, okay?
All right. Well, let me put my glasses on here. Just give me 1 second.
Get ready, Lon. It's
I
going to be
always
good.
joke with everybody, Lon, and I tell them when I have my glasses off, I can't hear very good. But I want to welcome Lon Strickler for being with us here tonight. What if the things we call impossible are simply misunderstood? What if the shadow that moves at the corner of our eye aren't tricks of the mind, but something watching back? Tonight on Explaining the Unexplainable, we cross the threshold between the known and the unknown. We're joined by a man who has spent decades doing what most people fear to even whisper about: documenting, investigating, and living among the world's strangest realities. He's the founder of Phantoms and Monsters, the voice behind Phantoms and Monsters Radio, and a name that has become synonymous with modern paranormal investigation. His name, ladies and gentlemen, is Lon Strickler. From the dark woods of Pennsylvania to the lonely roads where winged humanoids and shadow figures appear, Lon has followed the evidence wherever it leads. Through witness encounters, military archives, and places where history itself seems to bleed into the present. We'll talk about what's been happening lately, the rise in the unexplained sky phenomena, the growing reports of cryptid sightings, why disclosure feels closer now than ever before. Are governments preparing us for a truth too big to control? Or are we seeing the same patterns that Lon warned us about years ago? Cycles of manifestation that repeat across generations. So as the world stands at the edge of a new technological and spiritual awakening, we're asking the same question Lon has been asking for years. Are we ready to confront what's really out there? And maybe more importantly, are we ready to confront what's within? Because when you seek to explain the unexplainable, you don't just find monsters, you find mirrors. So let me say welcome tonight, Lon. Thank you for being with us on our show. It is a delightful honor to have you with us this evening.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yay. That was a beautiful intro there, Joshua, too. And I want to say that there's a really neat reason also that you're here is because Joshua and I are part of the Order of Exorcists, and that is now something we're able to talk about, is that we are also part of Jersey Shore's entertainment. And I was able to actually reach out to you through them to have you come on the show with us tonight, Lon. And I would love for you to be able to talk about or share, if you can, any information about that, if you're wanting to, because I think that's important. If you can talk about it, I know sometimes we can't talk about those things.
Well, it's a new venture for me, and I want to thank Jersey Shore Entertainment and CEO Mario Domino for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Um, Becoming a writer and producer with Jersey Shore, it does mark an exciting chapter for Phantoms and Monsters. As well, since 2005, my real mission has been to share eyewitness reports and explore the unexplained. And now, through this partnership, we'll be able to bring these stories and experiences to life on TV or streaming and beyond. So I'm grateful for the trust placed in me. and look forward to building something extraordinary together.
Oh, that's beautiful. That was like perfect to say. Wow. Mario is amazing. I mean, the whole team of Jersey Shores Entertainment is amazing. So I think it's awesome. What do you think, Joshua? Is that amazing?
It is. It's life is so funny how things happen. I don't believe things happen by happenstance. I believe everything happens for a purpose and for a reason. And it's funny how that if you just trust God, He brings things into your life that helps set the stage for you to do the things that He's called you to do, and He removes the things out of your life that He doesn't want there. And I'm thankful for that. I've seen Him do that many, many times, and I'm thankful for His direction tonight. And I'm thankful for what we do here on Explaining the Unexplainable. We get to talk to so many wonderful people, that are experts in their field of research, like Lon. And it's an hour of intense suspense, and it doesn't seem like the hour lasts long enough. It seems like it lasts for 5 or 6 minutes and then it's over. But I think it's funny because, and this is something I always think about, we've entered an age where the unexplainable is no longer laughed out of the room. And so many people are open to talk about things nowadays. And I think it's very, very good because it gives us the opportunity to share our stories, to share the things that we've witnessed, the things that we've experienced ourselves. So, what's going on? What's new, Lon? What's going on in your neck of the woods right now? What do you got going on besides what's going on with Jersey Shore Entertainment?
Well, I'm always on the lookout for new accounts, something that's going to raise its ugly head and make itself known. And I've been involved with a few very interesting cases over the years. Of course, we're still involved with the Chicago Mothman sightings, and we've been looking into that now since really 2011. And that continues on, maybe not to the degree it did earlier, but it continues. Here in Pennsylvania, we're also dealing with winged humanoids. I had my encounter here in South Central Pennsylvania back in 1988, and it's something I've really always been interested in. It's almost like I was destined to look into this cryptid. So we continue to look into that as well as other things that go on around here. I just got finished writing a book with 2 other gentlemen about the Glimmer Man phenomena, as well as we have a lot of cryptid canine sightings here in South Central Pennsylvania and into Maryland. So this is an area in particular that a lot of people just don't really think that there's a lot going on, but honestly, with the addition of Gettysburg and all that goes on there, and I just live right down the road from there. I was born and raised in this area. Nothing really surprises me anymore.
Wow. Can you talk about when you were growing up and some of the experiences that you went through that kind of, honed your path?
Well, the first and really the actual account or instance that really got me thinking that there's something a bit different about me. I am an intuitive. I'm a clairsentient as well. So, but as a young boy, I didn't really understand any of that. I used to spend a lot of time on the Gettysburg battlefield as a kid. I was kind of a little history nerd, but this was back in the late 60s. I was 9 years old. It was a time when you could get on your bike and just pedal 10, 15 miles somewhere and nobody would bother you. And I spent a lot of summer afternoons on the battlefield. Well, this particular day, I was in the area of the Valley of Death between Little Round Top, Devil's Den, and the wheat field. I was on the access road. And all of a sudden, it's like a television screen opened up in front of my eyes. And I was instantly in the battle. In fact, I saw soldiers, I heard gunfire, smelled gunpowder. All my senses were heightened. And I was living the battle. that lasted for about maybe 30 seconds and just slowly vanished away. And I had to have been shocked. I mean, I still remember it, but I just don't really know how I was reacting to it because there was nobody around me, so I couldn't really gauge that. But I knew then that there was something going on with me, and I was starting to understand what people were experiencing on the battlefield for really the first time. And as that went, as my time went on into looking into the paranormal, look, I was looking in doing cases back in the early 70s when I was in high school. When people would ask you what you're doing, you tell them, well, I'm a paranormal investigator. They always gave you that funny look, like, what's up with you? And, but the age without cell phones and other amenities, we kind of did what we could. And I was being referred to by a lot of people for a lot of things that were going around locally, that were happening locally. But what I would, when I did graduate from high school, I moved down to Maryland. I lived down outside of Baltimore for about 40 years, but I was going back and forth doing cases in both states and other places as well. And I was collecting stories. I was writing things down. People would tell me what they went through. I was keeping quite a log there for a while. And I did have a couple encounters. I had a Bigfoot encounter in 1981 outside of Sykesville, Maryland. And of course, in 1988, I had a winged humanoid encounter up near the Conewago Boy Scout camp. And that really got me my interest in cryptids. I wanted to know what I saw. I wanted to know what I experienced. So I became more and more involved with the cryptid beings, the unknown creatures, and that's how it really started to bloom. And in 2005, after writing for other blogs and other websites, I decided to go on my own and just start writing. And that's where it's going from here. So that's been 20 years now. I've been doing that blog almost every day.
Wow. Can you explain what you saw, like in the winged creature? Like, what did you see that day?
Well, it was, I was familiar with the Mothman of Point Pleasant, the whole thing and what had been going on. I never knew I was going to run into something like that. But what happened was, it was about mid-October. I forget exactly what the date was, but it was a Saturday, it was an afternoon, it was a Sunday, it was an afternoon, and I met a friend of mine who I went to school with, a guy I used to go on the battlefields with and spend nights when you could stay overnight at the battlefield. But we experienced a lot of things together. Well, this was at Timonium Fairgrounds. They had some type of Boy Scout get together for troops in Pennsylvania and Maryland. And I happened to run into him, and we decided to talk a bit and had some lunch, and we're talking and discussing a few odds and ends. We hadn't seen each other in about a dozen years. So he asked me as we were sitting there, you still involved with the paranormal? I said, yeah, I still do a lot of that. And he said, well, another scout leader and I are going to Camp Conewago next weekend because this past summer, a lot of the troops had been camping out in the woods like they normally would do, but they were getting run out because they were hearing these ungodly screams and didn't know what it was and was scaring the kids, and they were packing up and leaving. And it happened 5 or 6 different times. Yeah. So they decided that they were going to go up there, camp out, and see if anything would happen. So he asked, he said, can you meet us up there next Saturday? I said, yeah, I can do that. So I met him up there. We hiked into the woods, got to the campground, one of the bigger campgrounds, and right by the creek. But the trail was between the campground and the creek itself. So that first night, we got all settled about 6 o'clock. It was just starting to turn dark, and we nothing really happened the first night. Though when we did get up the next morning, the other gentleman mentioned something about hearing footsteps in the campsite. And we each had different tents. We had 3 tents set up, and we heard walking going through. I heard walking going through the tent or going by my tent. And I just thought it was one of those guys getting up to relieve themselves into the woods. I didn't know what it was, but nothing was disturbed in the campsite, so we just didn't think much about it. A lot of deer and stuff around there, so we didn't know what it was. But anyway, so that Saturday we spent almost all day out hiking around. There's a lot of different areas I wanted to look at. There's even a state game land nearby, so we just spent some time looking about. I wasn't really picking up on much. We weren't really seeing anything, experiencing anything. So again, we spent most of the day. We got back to the campsite at around 6 or 7 that evening. We're cooking dinner and just sitting around the campfire talking football or whatever came to mind, wondering what they had heard. So anyway, it was starting to get a little bit late. I guess it was around 10:30 or 11 or so. And we were getting ready to hit the sack when suddenly we heard a screaming sound. Now, it was coming from the west. It didn't seem particularly different than an animal scream or something you would normally hear in the woods, but it was interesting. So we decided, well, we're going to stay up the night. If as much as we can, at least one of us will stay up and maybe take rounds. But anyway, we were sitting there again at the campfire for about maybe another hour, and then we heard this god awful scream coming from the west. Now, it literally sounded like a woman screaming for dear life. It was that loud, and it was weird because it was kind of moving in and out. You kind of got that Doppler effect from, either something running through the woods back and forth or flying or whatever. So that was interesting. So we definitely decided that we were going to stay up. So we spent the next hour or so just sitting at the campfire and just talking, watching around. It was a pretty bright moon that night. I don't know if it was full, but it was a bright moon, so we could see into the creek and into the woods. So if there was anything out there, we could see something. So after a while, I got my legs were stiff, so I got up and stretched a bit. I walked out towards the creek, on the trail by the creek. And I had this funny feeling that something was watching us or something was aware we were there. So I walked out there a little bit. Then I came back and went back to the campfire. And I told this guy, I said, look, let's grab our flashlights, go out on the trail. We're not doing anything now. We're not seeing or hearing anything. Let's go out on the trail. Maybe something will stir up. So we got up and walked back to back on the trail heading west. We probably didn't get more than 50 or 100 feet away from the campsite when we all saw it, standing in the creek, in the middle of the creek, because the creek was really low that time of year, were these red eyes, and they were very bright. And there was a dark humanoid-like figure standing in the middle of the creek. And by the time we got the flashlights on this thing, it literally jettisoned itself into the air. And when it got to its apex, it screamed bloody murder. I mean, it took off. And we could hear it going away from us. Well, I guess we ran back to the campsite and were sitting there talking. And my buddy he wasn't saying a word. He was freaked out. And the other guy mentioned to me, he said, did you see something on its back? And I had. It looked like it had a large set of wings extended out over its head, but it weren't unfurled. And the way this thing jettisoned out of the creek, you would almost think it had to have used its wings, but it didn't unfurl. It didn't propel itself with wings. It was supernatural. Something supernatural propelled that thing up into the air. But the red eyes were bright as car tail lights. They were that bright. And they were projecting light. They weren't reflecting light. So after my buddy came around a bit, he said, "Well, I'm not staying out here tonight. I'm going to go up the administration building and sleep up there." So, okay. So they went up. I stayed at the campsite. I wanted to see what it was. I mean, but nothing ever happened that night. But later on, almost 20 years later, and I had talked to a few friends about it, a few associates and colleagues about this, and I was aware of the Mothman phenomena at Point Pleasant and everything. But when I started writing the blog in 2005, I didn't mention much about my investigations and things I had experienced over the years. But when I started getting a following on the blog, I guess around 2007 or 2008, I did mention it. And I put in there as much as I could about what had happened. And I got a response maybe about a week later from another scout leader who told me that he and his troop had been up to Camp Conewago just a couple of weeks previous to that. And the boys were out on a Saturday afternoon along the trail around the same area where we were. And they came running back and crying and screaming that they had seen a dragon on the trail. Now, of course, he thought they were just pulling his leg. But he said when he read my account, he was wondering if that had been what they saw. Maybe it was something. I had another gentleman who was living at Dick's Dam, which was just downstream from there. And he contacted me and told me that, he had been hearing screaming sounds. He'd been living there for over 20 years. And he thought, well, you think it's possibly what you encountered? And of course, I didn't know, but I said, I guess it's possible. Well, as the years went by, we've had 5 more sightings along Conewago Creek of something very similar to what, and it's always in the valley there where the creek is, and it's in different places as it runs downstream. So yeah, this was something that has been going on around here, and occasionally we get another sighting, not necessarily at the creek itself, but in the area. So we've probably documented at least 10 sightings in South Central Pennsylvania of this thing. Then, of course, when we started getting the sightings in Chicago, and the descriptions were very similar to what I saw, I became very interested, especially after 2017 when we were getting the early sightings coming out of Chicago. And in fact, we had about 50 sightings that year throughout the city and in some of the suburbs. But as time went on, more and more of the sightings were extending out beyond the city into the Chicagoland area, up into Wisconsin, parts of Illinois and Indiana. So at this point right now, we're about 184 or 85 sightings that we believe are actual sightings.
Now, is this the same creature, do you think? Or is it many creatures?
I think there's multiples. There have been instances where the same thing has been seen at the same time in areas, apart from each other. So I believe early on, I always believed there was at least 3 of them out there at one time. I would say there have been dozens since then. And the way people have described seeing them, fleeting sightings, but have literally seen those things manifest and vanish like it's going through an invisible doorway. So I do believe that there's some type of interdimensional being, some type of multidimensional being, but I don't think they're in the area all the time.
Right. So sometimes it's an apparition. Sometimes it is an actual physical manifestation. Like when Archbishop Chase asked the question, when it propelled straight up, did the water in the creek move? Did it?
I don't know. I don't know if the water moved. I'm pretty sure, but I heard the sounds of it. It was a corporeal being. I mean, these things, what I saw and what people have been experiencing in the Chicago area and other places as well are corporeal beings. They are flesh and blood. They're most likely able to move within either dimensions or realities in a physical form.
I'm 61 miles from Point Pleasant.
Mhm.
I live here in northeastern Kentucky, so I've been there many times. And it's funny. There's a part of the Silver Bridge that's still at this particular rest area in Gallipolis, which is right across the bridge in Ohio. And my wife's grandmother stopped there about 1 or 2 in the morning um, to use the bathroom. And she heard someone come in. Well, that's not unusual. The trucks, or the rest area. But when she walked out, she seen this 6 foot tall reptile, a reptilian person, no clothes on, just a reptile. And she tried to get around it. Well, she rebuked it in the name of Christ and pushed it out of the way and went running out the door and run to our vehicle. And you could tell by the way she told it that she was being serious about what she saw. I've seen Bigfoot many times on many occasions. I see UFOs all the time. And I know people think I'm crazy when I say that, especially when I talk to people who go to church with me about that. They look at me like I'm, they ask me what I've been smoking or what I've been drinking, But I've seen Bigfoot for many, many, many years, many, many different times. And Archbishop Chase, who's on here with us tonight, has seen Bigfoot as well on several occasions. You talk to the people. I remember Dad telling me they went up to Point Pleasant in the 70s, the late 60s, early 70s, to talk to people that experienced the Mothman. And it was very real, and the horror of the event that took place was still very much etched in their mind and their memory. And until people encounter something like that, you don't know. I mean, we laugh it off, not so much anymore, but used to, and we would tell stories about seeing Bigfoot or seeing red eyes on the train tracks or hearing things fly that was bigger than a bird that knocked tree limbs and branches out that we couldn't explain. People thought we were crazy and they laughed about it, but more people are talking about it now. And more people that have had these experiences are starting to come out and be more vocal about it. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, there's less ridicule now. I mean, of course, with the internet and a lot of the media covering these phenomena, and it's more mainstream than it was before. We still get sightings around Point Pleasant area. I still get sightings every once in a while. And
have you ever been there?
I've been there many times.
Okay.
I used to. In fact, I had been there before I even had my encounter. So I was very aware of what people were seeing and what they were reporting. But I have never actually had a report from anyone who has stated to me that they thought it was an apparition or some type of ghostly manifestation or something like that. They always say that it was a corporeal being. Why it is like that, I don't know. I believe the Mothman in general, but particularly at Point Pleasant, was a sentinel or guardian. I have investigated the old TNT plant or the West Virginia Ordnance Works area years ago before they even tore down the factory. And I had done a lot of paranormal investigations there as far as EVP work and other stuff, and just my own intuitive abilities. And there's a very, very strong indigenous energy there.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I can gather, and why it started when it did back in 66 and into 67, is because the area became more of a hangout and more of a place where young adults were just spending time. And I think this thing felt threatened. And I think it actually brought some type of guardian or sentinel into its midst. And I believe that's what the Mothman really is. These winged creatures. I think it's possible that that explanation may be valid for Chicago as well, but we just don't know why it is there. Now, we've had sightings where I believe that there are portals possibly at Chicago's O'Hare International, which is a place that has had a lot of weird phenomena over the years. There is a cemetery that's there. There were 2 cemeteries at the airport site. One was moved, but one remained, Rest Haven. And we've had investigators out there. I've talked to people who've been out there. I've talked to, it's near a cargo area as well in that southwest section of the airport. And there have been a lot of sightings and a lot of encounters at that area. And I believe there's at least 2 portals in that cemetery.
Wow.
I can't prove it. It's all anecdotal at this point. But as you look into this type of phenomena, be it Bigfoot or any other cryptid or any other being, as time goes on, you get more and more anecdotal evidence. You get more testimony from people who are really affected by what they have encountered. It has become evident to me that that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an entity that is not here all the time, is here watching for whatever reason, and it's probably protecting something.
Wow. Well,
Yeah,
yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Bishop.
I was just saying it makes perfect sense. That it's, and you talked about an indigenous type feeling to the area. Chief Cornstalk,
Yeah.
many years before, had put a curse, they say, on that city due to the fact of his family being murdered and him being arrested and discriminated against. So a lot of people believe that had something to do with Chief Cornstalk's curse on the city. Of course, there's so many different speculations, but I've never heard. I've heard bits and pieces of people that have similar beliefs about it, like you have. But it makes sense. It's protecting something, but what? We could talk about that all night. What is it protecting? Why is it there? And why? And it's not just spotted here. It's spotted all over the world. So there's something that it's protecting. Or I've heard people say that there were UFOs in the area as well when these creatures were there in Point Pleasant, right before the collapse of the Silver Bridge. So there's got to be some kind of connection between them and UFOs, or there may not be. I don't know.
Well, there was a lot going on there. It really was. I mean, that whole area, that whole Mason County area, particularly along the river, has always had a lot of phenomena going on. I've heard stories from years previous to that from people who swore they saw something very similar to this, but they weren't really sure what they saw. People invoked angels and other types of winged beings, saying that's what they think they saw, but they weren't sure what it was. Yeah, and it's a worldwide phenomenon. When we did the Netflix Unsolved Mysteries episode last year, the producers at Unsolved Mysteries were collecting reports from people who had seen the episode and contacted them. And we literally had 130 worldwide sightings come into us.
Wow.
Yeah. And, it's impossible to follow up on all of them because most of them were outside the United States. We probably had about 25 to 30 sightings in the Chicagoland area. And we did follow up on several of them. And, it just added to the caseload. So it's something that we're going to continue on. If it's just me, fine, but I'm going to continue to work on because I want to find some answers. And but it's just like everything else we do. I mean, I'm kind of what I call the eclectic paranormalist because I kind of look into anything that interests me, or something that is where somebody's having an issue with some type of manifestation or infestation or something that is causing them issues. And I've been doing this now for over 45 years. I'm just going to continue doing it till I can't.
Wow, that's amazing. So I want to ask about the remote view, like when that happened in the cemetery as a 9-year-old, and that I am a remote viewer. So when you said that about the TV screen, that was like exactly how it happens. It's like all of a sudden you're watching a TV screen. And so I'm curious if this had happened. Is this continuing to happen? Have you had any remote viewing abilities to look into what we're talking about now?
Well, I am a trained remote viewer. You know, when I was 9 years old, I was a remote viewer, but I did see a lot of different things. I picked up on a lot of different energy. I've got a weird sense of picking up different energies because I see colors in my mind's eye. Certain colors designate after a time that I recognize that there's something around me. But I am a trained remote viewer. I've been trained in coordinate remote viewing, scientific remote viewing from a retired remote viewer from MI6 who kind of took me under her wing and trained me through, over Skype, if you believe that, for about 6 months. And that was in 2010. And I've been using that protocol now. It's been revised because it's not necessarily like you've got a bunch of people who are going to do a remote view on their, and then come together. I mostly do it on my own, but I have other people who I've worked with before who also have their own groups now worldwide who do a lot of this for me. I have a dear friend who lives in Australia. She has her own team, and she's been working with me on many cases that I've done, particularly locally. So so this is I do use the protocol. I use other types of tools as far as that goes. Not necessarily divination, but in a way it is like divination. Not Ouija boards or anything like that. I mean, it's mostly something to do with my abilities to be able to pick up on certain energies, even remotely. Yeah. And to determine what's going on and to make an attempt to move these energies to another level. That's the best way I can put it.
Very cool. Very good. I really, I'd heard that about you before, about being the remote viewer and your abilities. And I do believe that there are the portals. In fact, we've had that here on our own property, and I've seen those plenty of times with my own investigations. We've had several people on, haven't we, Joshua, where I've asked that question about, I do believe they go through the portals. I've seen them myself. So, but we've had some people that have just really believe they are flesh and blood, and maybe that's just their experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of people that, and everybody. That's the beautiful thing about what we do. We all have our differing opinions, and a person's argument can be strong in both areas. Can be strong whether it be people that believe in portals or people that don't, and I think we all come together. I mean, it's up to those of us that listen to make the conclusion at the end of what we hear as we research. So, but thankfully, there's people that know what they're like Lon, that knows what he's talking about, that's very experienced, and you can tell. There's a sense of you could just tell that it's genuine what he's talking about, and it's coming right from his experience, and that's I love that. I appreciate that, even though there's different things that we talk about with people that we may or may not agree with. I tend to think that sometimes we have to be open-minded. I mean, we need to be open-minded when it comes to things like this, because we're talking about things we have no idea about, and yet we're so close-minded that we don't want to look at or think outside the box. And I want to be somebody that's always thinking outside the box, because I want to know the truth. I want to know what's going on around me. I want to know what these creatures are, and I hope one day in our lifetime, Lon, I hope one day we'll be able to know what they are.
Well, that's what we're striving for. I hope I make it long enough to get a few answers, but I have dealt with investigators, particularly Bigfoot investigators, who had been confident years ago that they were dealing with a flesh and blood being that was indigenous, that wasn't involved with any type of supernatural abilities. But as time has gone on, no bodies are found, not really much evidence, physical evidence. A lot of them eventually will come to the point where, there's something else going on here. I mean, this just is not some big primate running through the woods willy-nilly. I mean, sure, we may have areas where they are actual indigenous beings, like Pacific Northwest, areas of Texas around the Gulf into Florida. Of course, there may very well be living cryptid beings that people call Bigfoot, skunk apes, or whatever you want to call them. But for the most part, and many of those are family groups as well. But for the most part, people are seeing singular beings in different places throughout the United States and Canada, in particular, where it's just unexplained as to why they're there. And many times people will see them, and the reaction from these creatures is of surprise. They're just shocked that they can see them. Stan Gordon and I have talked about that for years, where these these Bigfoot or whatever they are shocked when when they realize that people are looking at them and reacting to them, and they just can't believe that they're being seen, and they just take off and disappear. There's just so much we don't know, and of course, it's all speculation at this point. But hopefully, we're going to find some answers, and that includes anything to do with the paranormal or supernatural, with alien beings or extraterrestrials, UFOs, or anything that's just otherworldly. I think we're going to get answers. I think as technology improves, I think when quantum computing becomes more of a mainstream, more of a commercial type reality, and prices of these things go down, I think somebody's going to have one and have a eureka moment where they're going to figure out, well, maybe there is something to this. Maybe these are supernatural beings, and now we can possibly find the truth about them and not wait for the government to tell us so.
Yeah, waiting on the government to tell us is, kind of like waiting in the line to get poisoned Kool-Aid. You know what I mean? It's like, here you go, drink this. You know what I mean?
This whole disclosure argument that we hear from investigators going in front of Congress and military talking about, well, we can hope that they're going to tell us what we need to know at some point. Well, I think if something lands on the White House lawn one day and they have no way of hiding it, then they're going to tell us. But other than that, we're not going to find anything out. At this point now, they're spoon feeding us, and it's left to those investigators who continue on to do this to come up with the answers. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of anecdotal evidence. It's going to be a lot of something that we just really know about. We're just grasping for answers. But maybe at some point we will grasp the right one and follow up on it and possibly come closer to finding out what people are actually seeing.
Well, Lon, you, in your investigations, what is your most seen thing? Like, is it cryptids? Is it paranormal, like ghosts? Is it werewolves? What is it, do you think, like, of all the names of what it could be?
I mean, it's mostly energies or some type of what people would call ghost or manifestations. I think a lot of these beings, and I've been working on the paranormal and infestations and a lot of other things for many years. I don't possess to say that I actually know what's going on, but I do know that a lot more people have had encounters with the unknown than they have with cryptids. Basically spirits and such. So you're getting a lot of that, and we do get a lot of that. A lot of it's the same thing, but it's still unexplained. I think the understanding of what we're dealing with in our world, our earthbound world, where these for the most part, a lot of these energies are stuck for whatever reason. And when they want recognition, that's called a haunting, because they do something that makes the living feel they're there or think they're there, and that's when we get called in.
So true.
Wow. So don't you think it's interesting that they really don't hurt a lot of people? You don't hear of them hurting anyone, like animals or even people. You hear about them. A lot of these creatures will, eat the animals and such and things like that. But you don't hear a lot of attacks happening. Is that true, or is that just I'm not hearing it?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, overall, cryptids and even in spirits and the unknown, attacks are very rare. You occasionally will get a malevolent attack of something, even a spirit. It does happen, but it's very rare. Just like poltergeist cases. I mean, there's some people who think there's a poltergeist case around every corner. Well, they're very rare. I mean, poltergeists for the most part are not spirits or energies that are initiated by the dead. I mean, there's something that's mind manifested by a living being. And as time goes on, and because of situations in a household where there may be dysfunction or death or something like that, to where one of the living in the household starts to unconsciously manifest an entity of some type that's got a little bit of energy behind it. And that's where they turn into problems. And look, if I go into a household, or I go to a location where there's a poltergeist, or I assume a poltergeist attack, or a being that's causing issues, the first thing I got to find out is what's going on with the people that are there, the living. They're the cause of it, and to get them to tamp down on what's causing the negative energy to manifest into something that's probably worse than what it really should be. It doesn't always turn out for the best. If the negative energy is tamped down, if people start getting along a little bit better with each other, many times these energies just dissipate or go their own way. But for the most part, they usually just dissipate when the host knows that they're probably causing a lot of this, and the activity doesn't bother anybody to the degree it had. And as the more somebody gets upset by something, the energy heightens and it becomes worse than what it really should be. But that's when, if you can get a handle on something like that, then it'll normally go away. But it takes time. I mean, I've been involved with poltergeist cases that last over a decade. It just happens, and especially when they've got enough to feed off of. They can even feed off dead energy. I've seen that before. I had a case out in Iowa where they were living. There was a malevolent being or energy that was living off the dead energy of a plane crash victims that were actually in the area. Didn't know they were dead, but they were hanging around. And until we separated the witnesses and experiencers from that location and kind of got them into a place where they felt more comfortable and they started acting like humans, then a lot of that goes away.
That's interesting. Because that's, on here, our property, we have all the plane crashes and the Pony 1-2, all those men just dissipated in the air right above the property, close to the property. And I often wondered about that. I'd seen the Army people, and we've heard the people had heard the footsteps. But what you're saying is that they're literally feeding off of their energy. Wow, I don't think I've ever thought of it that way. Never have I thought about it that way. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, when people die, when the life force is separated from the physical body, many times it remains on Earth. We get earthbounds. We get earthbound spirits or energies, and many of them don't even know they've passed away. They think they're living in some degree, and they need to make contact with the living, and that's called a haunting. Yeah. When they're doing that, they're scaring the bejesus out of these people, and that's when they call us in. Sometimes, like the case in Iowa, it got bad. It continued to manifest and to increase to the point where we were getting a lot of physical activity. This particular case, we had twin sisters who were adults. They were living together, them and their kids. And the one sister was very religious, very devout. And she kept a lot of religious items on the walls and pictures, but a lot of crucifixes. And crucifixes were one of the main things this thing did was take crucifixes off the wall, drop them, put them upside down, and many times throw them across the room. So that went on for a long time. And, it took a while till we kind of figured out what was going on. It took a little bit of investigations. It literally took us doing remote work around the neighborhood where this had actually happened at. And I do a few cases where there has been a major disaster, like an airplane crash. So sometimes that does come into effect. I'm not saying it happens all the time, but sometimes it does.
Wow. Oh my goodness. What about water? The water around, we've heard of that in many cases. If there's a lot of water, there's usually UFOs, there's usually something going on all mixed up together. Do you think that is something that you've run into too?
Well, I know in this area in South Central Pennsylvania, and particularly around Gettysburg, has a very high bedrock. If you ever go to Gettysburg, you notice all the huge boulders and stuff that are above ground, and it's a lot of bedrock that's actually above ground. And the water table is very high there. In fact, there's aquifers that run from the Chesapeake Bay up into this area. So you're talking about 40, 50, 60 miles of underground aquifers and high water tables. Water does come into as a factor at some points, but Gettysburg is kind of unusual because the battlefield. It was big, but in a way, it was part of a town, and the things that happened there were just so horrific. The granite and the limestone, being some type of composite crystal sedimentary rocks, are known to hold energy.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think a lot of what had happened there just became part of the landscape. We see a lot of residual hauntings where you just run back and forth. The same thing happens all the time, but it's almost like it's imprinted on the landscape. And I can go to Gettysburg and go to certain areas where people have been seeing the same thing for the past 50, 60 years. And it's always described as the same way. It kind of makes me laugh when people will say they get a photograph or a video of a specter moving among the battlefield. And it's always in an area where I know there's something there. It's been there. And I kind of laugh and say, well, they didn't really discover that. They're just seeing it for the first time, and it's just getting rehashed. A lot of these specters and a lot of these apparitions have been being seen for almost 200 years now.
Gosh,
isn't 150 years.
That's like so amazing because it's like they're on a clock almost, like they're coming around just doing the same repeated pattern.
Yeah, I think my encounter I had when I was a kid, I think kind of I was just lucky to be there at the right time for whatever reason. I've heard similar stories from people. I mean, I've had people come up to me because I used to do private tours on the battlefield years ago,
Wow.
and I've had people come up to me and say, "Well, I didn't know there's a reenactment going on today because there was a line of soldiers marching down the wheat field or here somewhere this afternoon." And I kind of laugh at them and think, "Well, that's nice to know. I didn't know they were going to be there, but they're seeing residual energy, residual troops moving, and it happens a lot. It happens a lot."
Wow. That's amazing.
It is. It's like the energy contained in that geographical location by all the horrible things and the trauma. Because, I work with people that battle trauma. I'm a therapist, so I deal with a lot of trauma, PTSD, things like that. And a lot of trauma keeps those things locked away in certain areas in our mind, our psyche, our subconscious. I think a lot of times geographically that happens too. A lot of that horror traps that energy there. And it's pretty fascinating. I've been by there, I've been through there, but I've never actually stopped. It's about 6.5 hours away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And on my way back up through New England, I'm going to stop. I know next year I've got to go and minister in New York City. So on the way up, I'm going to stop and actually spend maybe a day or so there.
Yeah.
And explore.
I mean, you have to. I've never been there, but I would love to be there. So you're going to go to Scotland. And we were talking about that before the show started, because Kev Dave Baker always wanted to meet. He would always talk about Lon, wanted to really meet him in person. And so Kev has passed away. But Lon is actually going to Scotland. Just think how many things are going to be there. You're going to go to Loch Ness. You're going to actually do that, Lon, do you think?
Yeah, all right. Yeah, I'm going to be up there in that area. We're Culloden Battlefield is probably the place I really want to go to, because I have heard so many stories and accounts from people over the years at Culloden, and Kevin and I used to talk about that all the time. So and we're going to be going to I don't know where we're going to have to map it out. I know those places we're definitely going to.
Lucky.
But, I look forward to it.
That's where our church, the main patriarch and archbishop of the church of the Reformed Old Catholic Church, lives in Glasgow. Mm-hmm. He's a dear friend of mine, and my family came from Scotland. So, one day I hope to go there as well and get to see the beautiful, beautiful countryside. It's a beautiful place. What a history.
Well, if you were born and raised in the Appalachians, you probably got a good chance of having Scottish or Irish in your background. So,
oh yeah.
Well, I was going to say that. Well, Bishop Joshua, in the house he's living at now, the house he grew up in, they would literally not down far from their house, he would see literal families of Sasquatch or Bigfoot. I mean, and they would see him, and it was like tell them that before we go, Joshua.
Yeah, it's at a state park. They're protected in state parks, and I was walking through the woods, came up over this ridge and saw this big creature that I called Big John. He's about 8.5, 9 foot tall, and he kind of just turned and looked at me, acknowledging me there, being there present, and he continued walking. So I followed in behind him, and I had an old disposable camera, and I've still got the negative somewhere. I've got the pictures somewhere, but I took pictures of him. He had a family with him. He had multiple women, female Sasquatch, and little babies. They were holding little babies. They were all sitting there, and the women were looking at me. The female Sasquatch were looking at me, but John kind of stepped over this big rock and sat down with his back to me, so he didn't feel like I was a threat. But I didn't stay there very long, because it was kind of an overwhelming feeling. And until you see a cryptid, or until you see a hominoid in person, you don't know how you're going to react or respond. Just like the first time we seen UFOs during COVID in 2020, my dad being a staunch Pentecostal, holiness Pentecostal, didn't believe in anything like that. I didn't either until we saw it in the sky. And now I see them all the time, once or twice a week. So but it was very, and that wasn't my first encounter with Sasquatch. That was one of many. But every time that I've ever seen them, it's never been, anything I felt threatened. And of course, I'm not going to try to make them feel threatened.
No, that's not true. When I had my encounter in '81, it was brief, but we kind of locked eyes on each other for like 10 seconds. I didn't know what I was looking at. I'd heard of Bigfoot, but I never thought I was ever going to encounter something like that. This thing looked more human than it did ape anyway. I mean, it was big, but it was what people would call looking like a Neanderthal or something like that. But it had a lot more hair and such, and the thick brow ridge and the conical head. I knew it wasn't human, but I didn't know really what I had encountered. But it's something you never forget.
That's true. Well, the intelligence that you see in their eyes.
Yeah.
It's not like looking at an animal. It's a weird experience. It's a strange and unique experience. And until you've had it, then you really don't know how it feels to. I mean, you're looking at something that you've been told to legend or it's mythological, and you're staring in its eyes. You see its face. You see its hands, its feet. And it's breathtaking.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like you stopped for a million years and it's only like a matter of seconds. It seems like a million years passes by while you're sitting there watching these creatures.
That's so crazy. Well, Ed, we have run out of time, gentlemen. I hate to be the bearer of the bad news, but it goes so fast. But we really appreciate having you on,
Yes.
and hopefully you'll want to come back again.
Sure.
We would love to talk more with you. And is there anything in particular you'd like to share with the audience that's coming up that you'd like people to know?
Not necessarily. I mean, my website is phantomsandmonsters.com, and I do post on there regularly. And I do have a podcast and show at Phantoms and Monsters Radio, which is on YouTube. So just put Phantoms and Monsters in, it'll come up. I've been doing that for quite a while now, but I'm always into expanding out and doing all kinds of different things. And you just never know what's going to come your way. So I'm always keeping my eyes and ears open.
Well, I know Brent Thomas shares your shows a lot on a Paranormal Portal.
Yeah, Brent's a good guy.
He is. I just love him. He's been on here before. I love Brent. Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. Goodness. Joshua, is there anything you want to say real quick before we end the show?
I just want to say it was an awesome show, and I can't wait till you come back. I can't wait to continue seeing the things that you do in your work and your research. And if you're ever down in this area, look me up. We'll go look for some Bigfoot and some UFOs together.
Sounds good.
So great. And we all just, everyone look out for Jersey Shores Entertainment. Go to that website, Jersey Shores Entertainment, and check out all the different productions that they have and their team. Mm-hmm. And we're really excited on the Order of Exorcists and the Unseen Realm to be a part of that. It's like super awesome. And it's awesome knowing that Lon Strickler is also part of, this path. It's really amazing. So thank you all for listening and watching. Thank you to our chat audience. You guys are awesome. We appreciate you coming in. Everybody, Vincent, Lorraine, Archbishop Chase, everybody else that I'm not seeing, but I appreciate you being here. And we hope to see you next week on Explaining the Unexplainable. Have a wonderful night.
Take care.